The cabin lights dimmed to a soft amber glow as Flight 731 prepared for takeoff from Heathrow to New York. Business travelers murmured over emails, a baby cried somewhere in the middle rows, and the air carried that sterile chill every frequent flyer learns to endure. In seat 24, sat Liyana Al-Rami, a 17-year-old whose serenity made her seem older than her years. Her dark eyes scanned the clouds beyond the window, fingers gently resting on a small velvet pouch in her lap. Inside it were 3 glass vials, her heart-stabilizing injections, worth more to her than the world's gold. She adjusted her seatbelt, smiling faintly as the intercom crackled, "Cabin crew, prepare for departure." Everything felt routine, until it didn't. A tall flight attendant with a polished smile and a clipped British accent approached. Her badge read, "Ms. Holloway." "Miss, you'll have to stow that pouch for takeoff," she said. "It contains medication," Liyana explained softly. "It can't leave my reach." "Temperature sensitive," Holloway sighed. "Regulations, dear. All loose items must be secured." Before Liyana could finish another word, Holloway's manicured hand snatched the pouch. "It'll be safe up front," she said, walking away. "No, please." Liyana's voice trembled, but the engines roared louder. Passengers nearby turned, uneasy but silent. The world often looked away when power wore the wrong skin. Minutes later, the plane lifted from the tarmac, slicing through a sea of clouds. Liyana felt her pulse quicken. A spark of dizziness flickered behind her eyes. She pressed the call button, her breath shallow. When Holloway returned, her tone was sharp. "Yes? My medication, please. I need it now." "You'll be fine, darling," the woman said, a note of condescension curdling her smile. "Don't make a fuss." Liyana tried to speak again, but words failed. The hum of the engines deepened into a thunder that drowned thought. Her fingers clutched the armrest, her heartbeat stuttering like static. Then, silence. Her body went limp, head tilting against the window. Passengers gasped. "Someone help her!" shouted a man from row 25. Panic ignited like a match. Up in the cockpit, the CO pilot's headset crackled. "Medical emergency in the cabin." "Altitude?" the captain asked. 22,000 feet and climbing. But far below, in Dubai's Al-Rami Financial Tower, a private alarm flashed across an encrypted console. "Priority alert. Flight 731. Passenger, Liyana Al-Rami. Critical condition." At that very second, Sheikh Rami Al-Rami, oil magnate, defense investor, and one of the wealthiest men in the Emirates, was in the middle of a late-night meeting with foreign ministers. The room froze as his tablet buzzed. He read the message once, then his chair scraped violently against the marble floor. "Cancel every line," he ordered. "Every flight. Now." His advisor blinked. "Sir, every flight?" Rami's voice dropped to a whisper that carried more weight than a shout. "They let my daughter die in the sky. Let us see if the world dares to fly without my permission." And as his private jet engines fired on the runway outside, a storm of orders began racing through air traffic networks across 3 continents, each bearing one signature: Sheikh Rami Al-Rami. The world didn't know it yet, but one man was about to remind them that even heaven could be grounded by grief. At 30,000 feet, panic reigned in silence. The hum of the engines was steady, but every heart in the cabin raced. The captain's voice broke through the speakers, calm, professional, but strained. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing a medical emergency on board. If there is a doctor present, please come forward immediately." A woman in a navy suit rushed from business class. "I'm Dr. Elena Cortez," she said, dropping beside Liyana's seat, her fingers pressed against the girl's wrist. "Weak pulse. Get me her medical bag, now," she ordered. The attendant, Miss Holloway, froze. I threw it away," she said. "You what?" the doctor snapped. "You threw away medication for a cardiac patient?" Passengers gasped. A man muttered, "Unbelievable." Another whispered, "She could sue the airline blind." Dr. Cortez barked, "Get the captain. We need to descend. She's in arrhythmia." The captain called the control tower, "Request emergency descent and clearance to nearest medical facility." But the reply came back garbled. A pause, then a chilling answer. "Negative. Flight 731. You are to maintain current altitude until further notice. Airspace restrictions are in effect. What restrictions? The pilot demanded. We've got a passenger dying up here. The controller hesitated. Sir, the system just flagged a global freeze from Emirati Defense Command. All flight paths rerouted. No movement authorized. We're trying to confirm. The captain stared at the CO pilot, disbelief turning to realization. Emirati Defense Command? He repeated. Oh my God, whispered the CO pilot. That's her father. Back in Dubai, Sheikh Rami Al-Rami stood before a wall of screens in his private command center. The world map glowed with red arcs, flight paths frozen mid-air, commercial, military, diplomatic, all at a standstill. Rami's voice was low, measured, dangerous. Patch me into Aurora Airlines control, he ordered. Within seconds, the airline CEO appeared on the monitor, eyes wide. Sheikh Rami, we're aware of the incident, but grounding global airspace is... Silence, Rami said, his tone flat. My daughter is aboard your plane, and you let your staff endanger her life. Until I see proof she's alive, no aircraft moves. Not one. But sir, not one. The CEO swallowed hard, understood. Meanwhile, on Flight 731, Dr. Cortez improvised. I need adrenaline. Get me the med kit. A trembling flight attendant handed it over. She's not breathing, someone cried. Dr. Cortez injected, pressed, breathed, a rhythm of desperation against the indifferent hum of the engines. Come on, sweetheart, she whispered. Breathe for me. Liyana's body jerked once, twice, then a faint gasp. She's back, the doctor exhaled. But we're losing time. At that moment, the intercom chimed again, this time with a sound no one had ever heard on a passenger flight. Attention, Flight 731. This is Sheikh Rami Al-Rami. Every head turned. The flight crew froze. The billionaire's voice filled the cabin, deep, calm, and cold as marble. From this moment, your flight belongs to me. You will follow my instructions exactly, and to the woman who touched my daughter's medicine. I know your name. I know your family. Pray she lives, for your sake. The line went silent. Holloway's knees buckled. Oh my God, she whispered. He's talking about me. The captain turned pale. Sir, what do we do? The CO pilot asked. Exactly what he said, the captain murmured, eyes locked on the horizon. Down below, the skies above Europe had gone eerily still. No takeoffs, no landings. Global networks buzzed, governments scrambled, and newscasters began to murmur one name. Sheikh Rami Al-Rami has frozen international air traffic. But Rami didn't care about politics. He cared about one thing, the trembling heart of his only daughter, 30,000 feet above the earth he now controlled. And as his jet roared to life on the Dubai runway, he whispered to his aide, tell the world I'm coming for her, and God help anyone who stands in my way. Above the Atlantic, Flight 731 floated like a trapped bird. The passengers, wide-eyed and whispering, could barely process the surreal reality. No plane could move anywhere, not one. Their world had been frozen by a man whose wealth rivaled nations. In the cockpit, the captain wrestled with disbelief. We're literally trapped, he muttered. How is this even possible? The CO pilot shook his head. I don't know, sir, but whatever he's done, it's global. Back in Dubai, Sheikh Rami Al-Rami's private jet, the Al-Sucker, lifted off under the pale glow of the moon. Its engines roared like twin lions, carrying not just a billionaire, but a father determined to claim justice. Rami sat in his leather command chair, his fingers steepled, eyes fixed on the satellite map of Flight 731. The glow of the plane icon pulsed red. Beside him, his chief aide, Malik Zahid, whispered nervously, Sheikh, the international authorities. Authorities can wait, Rami interrupted, his voice a chilling mix of calm and command. My daughter's life comes first. Everyone else can deal with the consequences. In the cabin of Flight 731, the passengers murmured as the intercom buzzed. This is Sheikh Rami Al-Rami. My daughter Liyana is alive, but barely. Your cooperation will determine if this flight lands safely. Any further negligence, and I will personally ensure you face consequences beyond your imagination." Holloway's hands shook as the words sank in. Every fiber of her being screamed fear. She had touched the life of the Sheikh's only child, and now the man controlling the skies had her fate in his hands. Up ahead, the horizon flickered with a shadow. A sleek private jet moving at impossible speed, cutting through the clouds as if the laws of physics bent to its master. It was the Al-Sakr, intercepting Flight 731. The pilot of Flight 731 watched in awe as Rami's jet aligned perfectly beside them. The Sheikh's voice boomed over the intercom once again. "Captain, you will maintain your current altitude. I will guide my team aboard to ensure my daughter's safety. Do not attempt any maneuvers. Any deviation and the flight will be declared compromised." Panic spread among passengers, but a strange calm settled over the cabin. They realized one thing. The world outside was powerless. Every airline, every radar, every airport was frozen by the command of one man. Minutes stretched like hours. A hatch opened on the Al-Sakr midair. Impossible but true. Trained paramedics and security operatives rappelled into the cabin of Flight 731. With precise coordination, Dr. Cortez and Holloway were swiftly surrounded. "Step aside," a lead operative ordered. "We need to stabilize the patient immediately." Rami entered the cabin last, his presence magnetic and terrifying. The passengers froze. He approached Liyana, who lay pale and trembling. His fingers gently brushed her hair back. "Father," she whispered weakly. Rami's eyes softened, a rare crack in the armor. "Hold on, my daughter. You are stronger than this, stronger than them all." The team worked with precision. Dr. Cortez administered the emergency medication that Holloway had discarded, and monitors beeped with renewed life. Liyana's pulse steadied, her breathing normalized. Passengers stared in awe. The man who had grounded the skies, bent governments, and disrupted flights for hours, all to save one girl, one child. Holloway, trembling, whispered, I didn't know. I didn't." Rami's gaze pierced her soul. "Ignorance does not excuse negligence. You endangered a life. Remember this, always." The rest of the flight was eerily silent. Every passenger processed the reality. A single billionaire had brought the world to its knees and bent it to save his daughter. By the time the Al-Sakr escorted Flight 731 safely back toward Dubai airspace, the global headlines had already exploded. Governments scrambled, international news outlets reported frozen flights, and the internet buzzed with disbelief. Sheikh Rami Al-Rami freezes skies to save daughter. Airline faces global scrutiny. Rami never looked at the cameras. All that mattered was Liyana, as she was lifted safely into his arms, her small hand gripping his thumb. He whispered softly, "You are my world, and no one, not the skies, not the world, will touch you." Outside, the skies began to move again. Planes resumed their paths, airports cleared. But the world would never forget the day a single Arab billionaire held the skies hostage to protect his child. And in that quiet moment, high above Dubai, the father and daughter shared a bond forged in the clouds, unbreakable, unshakable, and absolute. Back in Dubai, the skyline glimmered under the late afternoon sun. Sheikh Rami Al-Rami's towering office overlooked the city, a palace of glass and steel that mirrored his empire. Inside, the air was thick with tension. Liyana rested in a secure medical suite, her breathing finally steady. Rami paced slowly, each step deliberate, his mind focused like a laser. Malik Zahid, his aide, hovered nervously by the window. "Sheikh, the airline CEO has requested a meeting. They want to explain their side." Rami stopped and turned sharply. His dark eyes burned with intensity. "Explain?" he repeated. "Malik, there is no explanation for endangering my daughter's life. I want accountability. And I want it now." Minutes later, the CEO, a slick man named Farid Jannah, entered the office. His tailored suit could not hide the tremor in his hands. Behind him, Holloway was escorted in, head down, trying to hide her fear. Rami's presence was overwhelming. A billionaire's wrath distilled into physical form. He did not speak immediately. He studied them like a predator sizing up prey. Then, in a voice that resonated through the marble walls, you endangered a child. You ignored protocols. You disregarded life itself. Tell me, Farid Jannah, how does one justify this? Farid swallowed hard. Sheikh, I assure you it was not intentional. There was a misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? Rami's tone cut like a blade. You threw away medication that could have killed my daughter. Misunderstanding? Holloway flinched, her eyes wide. She tried to speak, but Rami's glare silenced her. I want the records, Rami continued, pointing at Farid. All internal communications, crew logs, and surveillance. Every single detail of that flight. And I want them by tonight. If I discover even a trace of negligence, I will see that your airline ceases to exist in Dubai. And not a single airport on this planet will welcome your flights, Malik whispered. Sheikh, perhaps a public statement. Rami shook his head. No, the world will know when I choose. First I act. Farid nodded frantically, realizing the depth of the storm he had unleashed. Sheikh, I understand. You have my word. Turning to Holloway, Rami's voice softened slightly but remained firm. And you endangered a life. Do you understand what could have happened? Yes, Sheikh Rami, she stammered, tears streaming. I was wrong. I didn't know. Didn't know? Rami repeated, his voice rising again. Ignorance cannot absolve recklessness. Lives are not games. My daughter's life is not collateral. Remember this. For every flight, every patient, every child under your care, the weight of responsibility is absolute. Holloway's knees buckled slightly. She nodded vigorously. I understand. I swear I will never. Rami cut her off. Actions speak louder than words. I want a full review of all personnel. Any lapse, any arrogance, any dismissal of duty. It will be exposed. Farid Jannah swallowed again, knowing the billion-dollar empire sitting across from him could ruin decades of business in a single phone call. Yes, Sheikh Rami, I will ensure everything is transparent. Rami's gaze softened only when he turned back to the window. Liyana's laughter, now faint and recovering, echoed in his memory. He breathed in slowly, a single thought anchoring him, protection at any cost. He spoke to Malik quietly, almost to himself. No child should ever be at the mercy of incompetence, Malik. Not mine, not anyone else's. Wealth, power, these are meaningless if they cannot protect life. Outside the office, Dubai hummed with life, unaware that its skies had been controlled, frozen, and tested by the will of one man, a father who bent the world to save his daughter. Farid and Holloway left the office trembling. The weight of Sheikh Rami's presence lingered, a reminder that negligence could not hide behind bureaucracy or money. Later that evening, Sheikh Rami summoned his team. Prepare a detailed report, he instructed. This is not just about my daughter. This is about every life above these skies. Let the world know that we will not tolerate carelessness. Let this be a message. Power without responsibility is worthless. Malik nodded, understanding fully that this was not vengeance. It was justice. And for Sheikh Rami, justice was absolute. As night fell over the city, lights twinkling like stars mirroring the heavens, the sheikh stood by his window. Liyana safe at last, yet his mind was already calculating the next move. The airline would not escape scrutiny, and Holloway would remember this lesson forever. Above Dubai, the skies were calm once more, but the shadow of a billionaire's wrath would hang over every flight for years to come. The next morning, Sheikh Rami Al-Rami convened a private meeting in the towering glass conference room of his headquarters. Sunlight spilled across the polished marble floors, bouncing off the crystal chandeliers, but even the light could not pierce the gravity of what was about to unfold. Around the massive oval table sat the airline's top executives, men and women used to wielding influence with arrogance, their designer suits a silent testament to power and wealth. But today, the air was heavy with tension. They had been summoned by a man whose presence alone could crumble empires. Rami did not waste time with pleasantries. His dark eyes scanned the room, sharp and unyielding. I trust you understand why you are here. A timid voice rose from the end of the table. Sheikh Rami, we understand. About the incident? Incident? Rami interrupted, his voice slicing through the room. A child's life was nearly lost because of your negligence. You call that an incident? The executives exchanged uneasy glances. Farid Jana, the CEO, tried to speak but faltered under the Sheikh's unwavering gaze. Rami raised a hand, signaling silence. You think your boardroom games, your quarterly profits, and your polished excuses can shield you from responsibility? I assure you, they cannot. He walked slowly, deliberately, around the table, letting his presence settle on each executive like a weight. Tell me, who authorized the disposal of medication? Who decided that a child's emergency care could be ignored because it disrupted your schedule? A young board member, pale and sweating, stammered, It was a protocol decision. Protocol? Rami's voice thundered. Protocol is not a substitute for human life. Every rule you enforce must protect people, not endanger them. Then he paused, his gaze piercing directly at Farid. You, CEO, are responsible. And you, Holloway, he added, his voice colder than the desert night, almost let my daughter die. Do you understand the magnitude of that? Holloway's eyes filled with tears. Yes. Sheikh, I didn't realize. You didn't realize, Rami cut in, his tone now a mixture of fury and calculated control. Ignorance is no defense. Lives are not collateral, and you will be held accountable for every choice made above those skies. The room fell into stunned silence. Some executives shifted uncomfortably, realizing that for the first time in their careers, they were facing someone whose power was absolute, not through money alone, but through influence, intellect, and the ferocity of a father protecting his child. Rami turned to Malik Zahid, his trusted aide. Bring forward the internal communications, the logs, and every recorded conversation from that flight. I want to see where the cracks were, who failed, and who lied. Minutes later, the first files were projected on the massive screen behind the table. Emails, chat logs, and surveillance footage detailed a pattern of arrogance and negligence, crew members ignoring emergency protocols, Holloway dismissing concerns, and the CEO's delayed response to critical alerts. Rami's lips pressed into a thin line as he studied each piece of evidence. Do you see it now? He asked, gesturing to the board. This is not one error. This is systemic. This is negligence sanctioned by complacency and protected by hierarchy. Farid swallowed hard. Sheikh, we can fix this. We'll conduct a full internal review. No, Rami interrupted sharply. Fixing this internally is insufficient. Lives were endangered. Children were at risk. The world must know what happens when arrogance and incompetence rule the skies. I will ensure your failures are public, and you will answer for them. The executives shifted in their seats, dread etched into their faces. Rami's next words carried a weight that no power in the room could resist. Effective immediately, all flights operated by this airline under my jurisdiction are grounded. Every aircraft, every crew, every service, suspended until comprehensive accountability is established. Safety is non-negotiable. And make no mistake, if I find even one trace of negligence overlooked, your licenses, your reputations, and your company will be obliterated. The room fell into stunned silence. This was not just a suspension, it was a message, a declaration that the life of a child outweighed billions in profit, a testament to a father whose wealth gave him the power to protect and enforce justice. Holloway lowered her head, tears streaming. Sheikh Rami, I understand. I will cooperate fully. I am sorry. Rami's eyes softened slightly, though the fire of his authority still burned. Sorry is meaningless without accountability. You will be retrained, observed, and if you ever endanger a life again, consequences will be absolute. Remember this day, not for me, but for every life you are entrusted to protect. Farid, realizing that his empire teetered on the brink, nodded vigorously. Yes, Sheikh, yes, we will comply. As the meeting ended, Rami turned to Malik. Prepare a public statement. The airline will not fly until I am assured personally that every safety measure is beyond reproach, and Holloway, see to it that she understands the gravity of negligence. Outside the towering glass palace, Dubai's skyline sparkled, but its airspace remained grounded, a silent reminder of the consequences of carelessness. That evening, Liyana, recovering, peeked from her suite. She watched her father pacing by the window, his silhouette framed against the city lights. Despite the tension and fury, she saw something else: unwavering protection, unmatched power, and a father whose will could bend even the highest echelons of the corporate world. Rami glanced at his daughter, a small, rare smile breaking through his stern demeanor. "Rest now, Liyana. The skies are safe, because I will not allow them to be anything else, not while I can breathe." And somewhere above, even as the city buzzed with activity, the aircraft sat grounded, a monument to a billionaire's justice, a father's wrath, and the lesson that no amount of money could override the value of a child's life. The morning sun had barely touched the golden skyline when Sheikh Rami Al-Rami returned to his private office. The grounding of the airline was only the first step. What troubled him most was the unsettling clarity that Holloway's negligence was not an isolated mistake. It was the symptom of a hidden rot running deep within the company's hierarchy. Rami's fingers drummed lightly on the obsidian desk, his mind racing. Each executive he had confronted yesterday had feigned compliance, but power could be deceptive. Those who appeared to bow might secretly scheme. Loyalty, he reminded himself, was rare, even among those who signed their allegiance with ink and gold. Malik Zahid, Rami's right-hand man, entered silently, carrying a thick folder of confidential reports. "Sheikh, I've compiled every crew report, flight log, and internal audit over the past 3 years. There are discrepancies you'll want to see." Rami gestured for the folder. Discrepancies that might explain why a child's medicine was discarded. Malik nodded. "And more. Unexplained flight diversions, budget cuts affecting safety protocols, delayed maintenance. It's systematic. Holloway is just the tip of the iceberg." Rami's eyes darkened. "Show me." Malik opened the folder, revealing pages of charts, emails, and encrypted messages. One line caught Rami's attention immediately. "Safety measures cost revenue. Approve cutbacks, compliance optional." It was signed with the initials of Farid Jannah himself. Rami exhaled slowly. So the CEO was willing to gamble with lives for profit. And how many lives were affected? Malik hesitated. At least a dozen near misses documented, and several cases were quietly settled with hush agreements. No public disclosure. Only those who complained were reassigned or silenced. A cold fury settled over Rami. This is more than negligence. This is a conspiracy. The board is protecting itself at the expense of passengers. And Holloway? She's a pawn. At that moment, Liyana entered, her medical bracelet still on her wrist. Her eyes, alert and fierce despite the ordeal, studied her father. "What's next, Baba?" Rami looked at her, then back at Malik. "We root out the corruption completely. I will not allow one more life to be endangered because of greed. Begin discreet surveillance on the board members. Every call, every meeting, every transaction. Trace it. I want absolute proof before we act again." Liyana frowned, a spark of rebellion in her gaze. "Baba, can you do all this without destroying the company entirely?" Rami smiled faintly. "The company's purpose is to fly safely, not to line pockets, and if the empire cannot honor that, it deserves no existence." Hours later, hidden cameras, cyber audits, and private investigators were deployed. Rami monitored each development from his office, his pulse steady but relentless. By evening, a pattern emerged. Several executives had been funneling funds into offshore accounts under the guise of safety improvements while simultaneously cutting essential medical supplies on flights. One particular email caught Rami's attention. Holloway had been instructed to remove medical kits with explicit warnings that a certain VIP passenger would be on the next flight. Rami's lips pressed tightly. A plan to sabotage patients, orchestrated from within the board itself. No wonder Holloway panicked, Malik added quietly. And the troubling part, Sheikh, this reaches beyond the airline. Some emails reference political figures, lobbying, even international contracts. The negligence isn't just for profit, it's for influence. Rami's eyes burned with intensity. Then we take control of the narrative, Malik, but we do it strategically. I will not just punish them, I will expose them, publicly, without risk to innocence. We start with evidence, and we end with accountability that cannot be ignored. The night deepened, casting the Dubai skyline in shades of violet and gold. Rami stood by the window, Liyana beside him, and the city hummed below. Each light in the distance seemed to represent a potential danger, a hidden lie waiting to surface. But Rami knew one thing with absolute certainty: he would dismantle the corruption piece by piece, ensuring that no one, no executive, no board member, no hidden puppet master, ever thought they could threaten his daughter, or any child, again. Bark, the loyal Saluki gifted to the family after a previous desert expedition, sat quietly in the corner of the room. Even the dog seemed to sense the gravity of what was coming, his sharp ears twitching with every faint click and rustle in the office. Remy knelt to the dog, whispering, "Stay vigilant, old friend. The skies will be ours again, and this time, every life aboard will be protected." As the city lights reflected off the polished glass, Rami began drafting his next move, a meticulously orchestrated plan that would not only safeguard the airline but also dismantle the shadows lurking behind its cockpit. Every action, every surveillance thread, every conversation would be used to expose a hidden empire of greed, arrogance, and endangerment. And somewhere in the shadows of the boardroom, the executives who thought themselves untouchable were already beginning to sweat. Because Sheikh Rami Al-Rami did not forgive negligence, and he did not forget betrayal. The next morning, Sheikh Rami Al-Rami's private jet cut through the early haze over Dubai. In the cabin, Liyana remained quietly beside him, her medical bracelet now replaced with a discreet monitor to track her condition. Rami's mind was elsewhere, focused entirely on the storm he was about to unleash. By the time the car carrying him reached the gleaming headquarters of Al-Rami Aviation, the first ripple of tension had already begun to spread through the executive floor. Employees whispered of the Sheikh's sudden grounding of all flights and the mysterious investigation quietly unfolding. Rami's security team led him straight to the top-floor boardroom. Behind the massive glass walls, the board of executives, including Farid Jana, the airline CEO, waited, their expressions carefully neutral, but their eyes betraying fear. Rami didn't waste time with pleasantries. He strode to the head of the long obsidian table, his gaze sweeping across the faces of men and women who had thought themselves untouchable. "Good morning," he said, his voice calm but sharp. "I trust you slept well, knowing that your decisions have endangered lives." A murmur ran through the room. Farid cleared his throat. "Sheikh Rami, your actions yesterday, grounding flights causing panic." Rami held up a hand. "Don't speak. I am here not to debate. I am here to show evidence. Please, Malik." Malik Zahid, standing near the projector, clicked a button. Screens flickered to life along the walls of the room. Emails, internal memos, and surveillance footage filled the glass panels. Holloway's discarded medical kits, executives' private offshore accounts, and direct instructions to bypass safety protocols were displayed in vivid clarity. Farid's jaw tightened. "This is circumstantial. You're painting a narrative that may not—" Rami interrupted, his voice rising with authority. "Circumstantial? This is a video of Holloway being explicitly told to discard medications for very important person passengers. This is your email approving budget cuts that eliminated emergency kits. And these are the contracts where corners were cut in maintenance to save money while endangering everyone aboard." The room fell into a tense silence. Some executives looked away, unable to meet the unyielding gaze of the sheikh. Others whispered nervously to each other, trying to salvage dignity. Liyana, standing beside her father now, raised her voice with calm precision. "Do you realize what could have happened if my medication hadn't been saved? That plane wasn't just carrying me, it carried dozens of passengers who trusted your airline with their lives. And you gambled with it for profit?" A chill spread across the boardroom. Farid's composure cracked slightly. "Sheikh, we never intended." Rami's hand pressed on the table. "Intention does not erase consequence. Lives were at risk because of your negligence, and I will ensure it is accounted for." Malik advanced, revealing one final damning piece of evidence, a ledger of payments, bonuses, and hush agreements intended to bury incidents of near-fatal negligence. "These are your signatures, your directives, your complicity," he said, voice cold. Rami stepped forward, his presence commanding every inch of the room. You have a choice. You can resign quietly, accept accountability, and allow me to restructure this airline for safety, or I can expose everything to the government, the press, and international aviation authorities. Your careers, your freedom, your reputation, all gone in one calculated reveal. Sweat beaded Farid's temple. The other executives shifted uncomfortably. Realizing that their carefully constructed facades of authority had crumbled, Rami turned to Malik. Begin recording statements. Every confession counts. One by one, executives were brought to speak, their denials slowly faltering under the mountain of evidence. Rami listened carefully, observing the cracks in their lies, noting who might be irredeemable. Hours passed. By evening, the boardroom had been transformed into a chamber of reckoning. Some executives, overwhelmed by the exposure, handed over keys, passwords, and financial records willingly. Others resisted, but Malik and the security team made sure resistance was met with precise containment, never harming anyone. Finally, Rami addressed the remaining group, voice measured but deadly serious. This is your last warning. Transparency, accountability, and safety will define this airline from this moment forward. Any deviation, and I will not hesitate to take legal action and public exposure to the highest level. Silence, fear, respect. Liyana exhaled softly, looking at her father. Baba, you did it. They're scared enough to comply. Rami nodded, eyes still piercing through the room. It's not fear alone, Liyana. It's awareness. They now understand the weight of responsibility, not just for profit, but for human lives. Outside the boardroom, Malik whispered, Sheikh, with this you can rebuild the company properly. Safety protocols, training, accountability, every level can be reformed. Rami's gaze returned to the Dubai skyline visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Yes, and when the next flight takes off, it will carry not just passengers, but the certainty that they are protected, that no one inside will ever gamble with their lives again. Bark padded quietly behind him, the loyal Saluki's presence a silent reassurance. Rami knelt, scratching behind the dog's ears. Soon, old friend, soon the skies will be safe again. And somewhere deep in the executive offices, Farid and the remaining board members whispered among themselves, the first seeds of genuine reform beginning to take root, forced by accountability, guided by the unwavering will of Sheikh Rami Al-Rami, and the courage of a daughter who refused to be silenced. The following morning, Dubai's skyline shimmered under the rising sun, casting golden reflections across the glass towers of Al-Rami Aviation's headquarters. Inside, Sheikh Rami Al-Rami moved through the corridors with purpose, every step resonating authority. Liyana trailed close behind, her expression a mixture of determination and concern. The first order of business was inspection, flight manifests, maintenance logs, safety protocols. Everything that had once been neglected was now under scrutiny. Every terminal, every plane, every crew member came under Rami's piercing gaze. He didn't just want compliance, he demanded transformation. In the hangar, engineers and mechanics paused, startled as Rami entered. His presence was formidable, commanding respect without a word. Show me every maintenance report from the past 6 months, he demanded. No omissions, no excuses. An engineer sweating under pressure stammered, Sheikh, everything is logged, but some records may be incomplete. Rami's eyes narrowed. Incomplete records are more dangerous than no records at all. Lives hang on these sheets. Liyana stepped forward, her voice calm yet firm. Baba, I want to personally oversee the new in-flight safety protocols. Every flight must be re-evaluated before takeoff. Every passenger, every crew member, every emergency measure. No exceptions. Rami studied her, pride and concern battling in his gaze. You understand the weight of that responsibility, Liyana? I do, she replied, voice steady. I've seen what negligence looks like. I won't let it happen again. The day was long. Every plane was inspected from hull to cockpit, engines were recalibrated, and flight attendants were retrained under strict oversight. Malik Zahid coordinated the legal and administrative updates, ensuring compliance with international aviation standards. But as the day drew on, Rami sensed that this surface-level compliance wasn't enough. The whispers of sabotage and internal betrayal still lingered. Someone had tried to silence them before. They could try again. Late in the evening, as the hangar lights flickered against polished fuselages, an alarm sounded. A small, unmarked drone hovered near one of the jets. Malik's team scrambled to intercept it, but Rami's voice cut through panic. "Do not fire. Observe." The drone's camera feed revealed a face Rami knew, one of the board members who had pretended compliance but still harbored resentment. The footage confirmed it. Attempts to tamper with aircraft systems had not ceased. Liyana's eyes widened. "Baba, they're trying again. Someone on the inside." Rami's jaw clenched. It seems grounding the skies was only the first step. Now we need to dig deeper. Find every hidden agenda, every secret attempt to undermine this airline. Whoever you are, you will be exposed. They spent the next hours tracing data logs, analyzing flight paths, and cross-referencing employee access codes. Slowly, the hidden web of sabotage unraveled. Employees loyal to profit over life had been planning subtle disruptions, hoping the Sheikh's grounding would end without consequence. Rami addressed the gathered senior staff, his voice cold and unyielding. "If you are part of these attempts, you will face consequences. Your negligence almost cost lives. Not a single compromise will be tolerated. Ever again." Liyana, standing beside her father, added, "And if anyone tries to hide anything from us, the consequences won't just be professional, they will be personal. We will know." The message was clear. Fear and respect mingled in the room, but it was not fear alone. This was accountability, and for the first time, the airline's culture began to shift. As night descended over Dubai, Rami and Liyana stood in the hangar, the polished planes reflecting the city lights. "Baba," she said softly, "do you think this will be enough?" Rami gazed at the jets, the scale of the operation pressing down on him. "It is only the beginning, Liyana. The skies may appear calm, but threats linger in every shadow. We have to be vigilant. We cannot afford complacency, not even for a moment." Bark, now resting near the entrance, lifted his head and growled faintly, sensing the tension that words could not capture. Liyana reached down to scratch behind his ears. "Even Bark knows," she whispered. "Even he can feel the storm coming." And indeed, as the city slept, unseen eyes watched the hangar from a distance. The forces that had once ignored accountability were regrouping, plotting, and waiting for a moment to strike. But Sheikh Rami Al-Rami and Liyana were no longer the passive targets they had been. The battle for control of the skies and the safety of every passenger was just beginning. The golden city gleamed under the moonlight, but within the hangars and boardrooms, a storm was brewing, one that would test loyalty, courage, and the unbreakable bond between a billionaire, father, and his determined daughter. If you want, I can continue with Part 9, where the first sabotage attempt escalates mid-flight. Liyana acts decisively to save passengers, and Rami's authority is challenged publicly, building to the climactic showdown. The sun had barely risen over the Dubai skyline when Flight AR-427 prepared for takeoff. Liyana Al-Rami, now personally supervising every detail of her father's airline, stood at the control hub, her eyes scanning screens, flight logs, and live cabin feeds. "Cabin secure?" she asked the head flight attendant, a seasoned professional named Nizar Fadel. "All checks complete, Miss Liyana. Passengers are boarding smoothly," he replied, a flicker of unease in his eyes. Liyana's instincts, honed through weeks of investigations into internal sabotage, refused to let her relax. Something about this flight felt off. Her gaze drifted toward the cockpit monitors, where minor fluctuations in the plane's fuel diagnostics appeared. Subtle enough that most wouldn't notice, but enough for her trained eye to catch. "Baba," she whispered into her headset, "I think someone's tampering with the systems. I want a full diagnostic override before takeoff." Rami Al-Rami, watching from the private observation suite, frowned. "Do it. No plane leaves under my name if there's even a shadow of risk." Minutes later, the engines roared to life, the plane lifting smoothly into the sky. Liyana stayed glued to her station, watching telemetry and cabin feeds. And then it happened. A subtle but sharp vibration ran through the fuselage. The cabin attendants exchanged uneasy glances. Liyana's eyes narrowed as another indicator flashed. Fuel pressure was dropping faster than it should. "Baba, this is not normal," she murmured. Her hand flew over the emergency override, locking systems, running diagnostics. Suddenly, a loud commotion erupted in the cabin. Nizar Fadel's voice crackled over the intercom. "Miss Liyana, we have a medical emergency. One of the passengers." It was worse than she imagined. The teenager seated near the rear, a young black girl named Ayani Fadil, was struggling to breathe. Her inhaler, her essential medication, was nowhere to be found. A moment of clarity struck Liyana. She remembered the old reports of sabotage, deliberate interference with passenger amenities and emergency equipment. "Bring her to the cockpit," Liyana barked. Two attendants hurried Ayani forward. Her face was pale, beads of sweat glistening on her forehead. Liyana knelt beside her, examining the girl's emergency kit. The inhaler had been tampered with, rendered useless. Rage boiled in Liyana's chest. "Who did this?" she demanded, scanning the live cabin cameras. Her eyes caught the faint reflection of a cabin crew member, a man named Tariq Halim, slipping something into his pocket near Ayani's seat. Rami's voice came through the headset, firm and controlled. "Liyana, handle it. Keep the passengers calm. I'll deal with the consequences on the ground." With practiced precision, Liyana instructed the pilots to maintain altitude while she administered emergency aid. Her hands moved swiftly, stabilizing Ayani until her breathing eased. The cabin, tense moments ago, erupted into murmurs of relief and gratitude. "Miss Liyana, you saved her," Nizar said, awe and respect in his voice. "Do not thank me," she snapped. "Thank accountability. Thank vigilance. This should never have happened in the first place." Meanwhile, the sabotage perpetrator, Tariq Halim, realized he had been caught on live feed. His face paled as Liyana's voice rang through the intercom. "Tariq Halim, step forward and explain yourself. Every action you've taken is recorded." The man froze, panic evident. Other crew members glanced nervously at him, knowing that Sheikh Rami's daughter did not tolerate deception. Back in the observation suite, Rami watched, his hand gripping the edge of the console. Pride and relief warred within him. His daughter had not only identified the threat mid-flight, but had acted decisively to save a life, a stark contrast to the negligence that had plagued his airline before. As the plane prepared for landing, the situation in the cabin remained under Liyana's control. Tariq Halim was escorted to the rear under supervision, passengers none the wiser to the depth of the attempted sabotage. Once safely on the tarmac, the boarding gates opened and emergency services attended Ayani. Rami descended into the hangar personally, meeting his daughter as she stepped off the plane. "You did more than save a life today," he said quietly, gripping her shoulders. "You proved why we cannot compromise ever again." Liyana's gaze hardened. "This is just the beginning, Baba. If they tried this once, they'll try again. We need to rebuild everything, trust, systems, protocols, and we need to find who else was behind this." Rami nodded, his jaw set. "Then we start now. No delays, no excuses. Whoever thinks they can undermine Al-Rami Aviation will face consequences beyond their imagination." As the Dubai sun set, casting long shadows across the tarmac, the billionaire and his daughter stood united, a force of authority, vigilance, and unyielding resolve. But even in their triumph, the storm was not over. Hidden forces watched from the shadows, their intentions dark, their patience long. The battle for control of the skies was far from finished, and the next move could strike at any moment. Bark, lying beside the jet stairs, lifted his head, ears twitching. The old hound had sensed the turbulence before it happened, and now he remained a silent sentinel, warning of dangers yet unseen. And above, the first stars blinked faintly in the twilight sky, witnesses to a war that was only beginning, one that would test loyalty, courage, and the unbreakable bond between a billionaire father and his daughter, fighting not just for legacy, but for life itself. The following morning, Dubai shimmered under a golden sun, but inside the private boardroom of Al-Rami Aviation, tension crackled like electricity. Liyana Al-Rami stood at the head of the table, her laptop open, displays of security footage and flight logs surrounding her. Every camera, every crew log, every passenger report from last night's flight, she said, voice sharp, has been cross-checked. The sabotage was deliberate, and it goes deeper than one man. Rami Al-Rami, towering in his tailored thobe, leaned over the table. His eyes were icy, controlled. I want names, I want accountability, and I want it public. Those who think they can threaten my airline and my people will see the consequences. Liyana's fingers flew over the keyboard, bringing up hidden security footage. There, in plain view, Tariq Halim was seen signaling to a man in a dark suit seated near the cockpit. Not just negligence, this was orchestrated sabotage. Baba, Liyana whispered. He's not acting alone. Someone inside the company planned this. Someone powerful. Rami's lips pressed into a thin line. Then we make sure the world knows. No private settlements, no quiet dismissals. Transparency is the ultimate deterrent. By midday, the Al-Rami family issued a public statement. The footage of Tariq Halim's actions went viral. News outlets across the Middle East, Europe, and the US broadcasted the shocking revelation. A billionaire's airline, nearly compromised mid-flight, saved only by the vigilance of his daughter. Public outrage surged and government regulators demanded full disclosure. Liyana personally presented Ayani Fadil with a formal apology and ensured she received a lifetime scholarship under the Al-Rami Foundation. Meanwhile, inside the corporate offices, the internal investigation unraveled a conspiracy that reached deep into boardrooms. Those involved were not only fired, but barred from aviation positions for life. The message was clear: Al-Rami Aviation tolerated no betrayal. But the personal victory was what mattered most to Liyana. She visited Ayani in a private suite of the Burj Al Rami, the family's opulent headquarters, and handed her a gift, a custom medical kit ensuring no threat could ever compromise her safety mid-flight again. Thank you, Miss Liyana, Ayani whispered, tears in her eyes. You didn't just save my life. You changed the way I see courage and power. Liyana smiled softly. Remember this. True power is not measured in money, but in responsibility, and in protecting those who cannot protect themselves. Rami watched from the balcony, pride swelling. He had built an empire of wealth, but today he realized that his daughter's moral courage, intelligence, and decisiveness had created a legacy far stronger than any fortune. As night fell over Dubai, the city lights glimmered, like stars scattered across the desert. Inside the Al-Rami penthouse, the family gathered, not just to celebrate victory, but to reflect on the lessons learned. Rami spoke quietly. This is more than a scandal averted. It's proof that wealth without integrity is hollow, but vigilance, courage, and loyalty, those are priceless. Liyana nodded, gazing out at the horizon. She understood now that being part of a billionaire family was not just privilege, it was a responsibility, to protect, to act, and to ensure justice. And somewhere in the shadows, even as Dubai slept, Bark lifted his head. The old hound had sensed every threat, stood guard through every danger, and remained a silent testament to loyalty that never faltered, even in the face of greed and malice. The scandal had ended, the betrayers exposed, and the skies of Dubai were safe once more, but the story became legend. A tale of vigilance, courage, and a father-daughter duo who proved that true authority was not in wealth, but in action. In a world where power can corrupt and wealth can blind, the greatest legacy is not gold, buildings, or private jets. It is courage, integrity, and loyalty. Sheikh Rami and Liyana Al-Rami's story reminds us that responsibility is the true measure of greatness, and that protecting the vulnerable is the highest honor a person or a family can achieve. Even empires can fall, but principles endure. And sometimes a single act of vigilance can change not just a life, but the course of an entire legacy.